300 years. We've said this and we've established this before. The difference between my
Yours has none for 200
No,
years.
hold on.
I've looked and
That's false. That's false.
I've looked.
No, your websites are wrong.
Please stop. This is your website.
Let me stop.
Is your website.
Let me finish. I'll let you speak. I'll let you speak. You spoke for some time, right?
Yeah.
Did I interrupt you? No, I didn't. Do you have a chain of narration from any scroll that you like, whether it's the Masoreti text or it's the Dead Sea Scrolls or any other scroll that you like? Have you got a chain of narration from that scroll or the authors of that scroll, whoever by the way they may be, because we don't know who they are, all the way to Moses? No, you don't. The answer is no, you don't. It's a dead history. No historian on the face of the earth will tell you, my friend, look, sorry to say, your Haggadic texts, your tafsir, your exegesis of your Old Testament, so you call it the Hebrew Bible, that was written 300 to 400 years after Jesus himself. Jesus, not Moses. We're talking about 300-400 years, according to Newsner. I told you this before. You didn't know his name, then you went and found out. Which is one of the most prolific Jewish scholars.
Secular, but Jewish.
No problem. He wrote 900 books. He's one of the most printed people in the world. Actually, I think he holds the record for the most books ever written. Jacob Newsner. So anyway, according to him, it's 300 to 400. The tafsir, the exegesis that you have of your Hebrew Bible, that we can now find, we can access it. It's been written 400 years after Jesus. You do not have a chain. You are lying if you say you have a chain of narration. You are lying if you say, hold on, if you have a chain of narration from Moses to that. Number one. Number two is, oh no you don't. Now you made a claim about Islam. You said it was 200-300 years. That's absolutely false. Well, you're talking nonsense. Because number one, the chain of narration goes back to the Sahaba, the companions, the ones who were there with the Prophet. Some of them actually wrote stuff. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq had a sahifa. Amr ibn al-As had a sahifa, which means something written, like sefer, sefer, sahifa, quite similar. Suhuf and Safar are the same, by the way. Hebrew and Arabic are very similar languages. Yeah, Safar means what? It means a book or a scroll. And Sahifa means scroll as well. So that's why I know these things. But what I'm saying is, these things were absorbed. I mean, you mentioned 200-300 years. When did Abu Shihab al-Zuhri die? Abu Shihab al-Zuhri, he died in the 120, 140, something like that. Yeah? AH. Is that right? Yeah? 120 AH. 120 AH he died. That's 110 years after the Prophet Muhammad died. 110 years. And that was a state effort to codify the hadith. A state effort. So you're saying 200-300 years is actually ahistorical, even from the codification, what you call Tadween al-Sunnah. But Tadween al-Sunnah, or the codification of the Sunnah, is not the same as it's the same as Riwayat al-Hadith, which was there from the time of the Sahaba. So you're confusing two things. And by the way, that's rich coming from someone who believes in the oral tradition. You didn't have a written book for 1,400 years. And you're talking to me about, oh, it's 200-300 years after the Prophet Muhammad. You didn't have one single scroll, my friend. For 1,000 years, at least our scrolls were there. We had suhuf of the Sahaba. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Uktub li ibn Abi Shah." He said to the Sahaba themselves, write it down. So we have it in our tradition. And then we have it all the way through to the state effort of Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who died at 120, was there a tabi'i, basically. He was a salaf. He was tabi'i. There was a state effort to write. And then after him you have the Muwatta and Bukhari and these things. What you're talking about 200 years. That's what you're talking about. Who Bukhari died like 234 or something like that. And Ahmad died 241 or something like that. Yeah? That's what you're talking about. You're not talking about even... So you're wrong. You're wrong. You are wrong. Yeah? Don't make claims about Islam which you have no sources for. And you basically don't... But if this is an argument, what I'm saying is, min babi awla, as we say in Arabic, if this is an argument, that your whole argument for why Moses is true, and your codification, and it was there 1,400 years after, 1,500 at least 1,500 years Moses, and number two, that most of it is oral actually, yeah, and there's no and the codification, and also, yeah, if this is your argument, then that which we have is so much superior by historical necessity than what which you have. As that's why I said to you before, whatever evidence you provide to me today for Moses, I will provide for you a better evidence for Muhammad. If your evidence is entirely, most of your strongest evidence you provide for Moses is the preservation of the religion.
No, mass revelation.
Mass revelation. Tawatur, we have it as well. Mass revelation. Yes, you say I don't. That's
Name
exactly
one person besides Muhammad who heard God talking to Muhammad.
Moses.
Moses heard God speaking to Muhammad.
No, Moses speaking to God. But but here's what we'll say.
Yeah, one
but the
person
thing is,
who heard God speaking to Muhammad.
That's a false criterion.
Well, that's what our criteria was. That was the whole point.
No, it doesn't matter. Your criterion is flawed.
It does matter.
No, hold on. Because your criterion is based on the premise that there should be other people that listen to the revelation of God. What we do have instead, and we have narrations for it, is the physical effect of how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he would receive revelation, how that would have an effect of him, which would be physically unintelligible in the situation that he's in. For example, we have a hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that when the Prophet ﷺ was on the camel, that when the revelation came to him, the camel would sink. Number two, it's even mentioned that when the Prophet ﷺ would receive revelation, that he would sweat heavily, profusely on a cold day. في يوم بارد, on a cold day. Number three, it's mentioned that when he would have revelation, that there would be jaras, like a loud ringing noise. These things are something other people have witnessed. Number four, sometime we believe that the revelation comes through a man, that Jibril alayhi salam comes as a man, and that man was witnessed by other companions, like in the famous hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab, where he says that the man came shadid bayad al-thawb, sawad al-thiyab, and so on. And so this man came and everyone witnessed him. And there are other evidences beside that point. The point is that he was not the only one who saw the physical effects of, he was not the only one who saw the physical effects of revelation. He was not the only one who saw the physical effect of revelation. And we can make the same argument with miracles of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The things that happened with him, where the water came from his fingers, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even in Shiqaq al-Qamar, or the splitting of the moon. All of these things were witnessed by the Sahaba. Or for instance, by the companions of the Prophet, the primary audience. Or for example, the fact, we mentioned this already, which is a prophecy, which is still there nowadays, that the Romans had beaten the Persians and so on, that's in the Quran, and that they had been defeated in the first place. And that goes back to 1821, the prophecy. And there's a range of different prophecies which we can verify until this day. And the other physical miracles of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, many of which were witnessed. For example, small food turning into many different food. A lot of Sahaba, we have tawatur on these issues, which means that mass transmission. So if your criterion is that something which is otherwise supernatural, like for example, I'll give you Suraqa bin Jahsh. Suraqa bin Jahsh was a Sahabi who tried to attack, actually at that time he wasn't, but he tried to attack the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, kill him. And then his camel sunk into the sand when he tried to attack him. Things like this, or the fact that the winds came. إذ جاءكم من فوقكم من أسفل منكم زاغت الأبصار وبلغت القلوب الحناجر تظنون بالله الظنون. This time in Ahzab, where the winds came and they acted as a miracle. The Sahaba saw that. That's 10 already you got in your hand. I can keep going on and on.
No, I'm just keeping track of the points.
Yeah, these points. But the point I'm making is that if your argument is hinged on the fact that something supernatural happened to Moses, which was witnessed by a community, and that you have a mass transmission of that thing which is supernatural up until this time, which is seen with an unbroken chain, then what we have in more miracles which have been witnessed, with a better chain of narration, which is historically verified, and that there has been critical methods applied to that, called Jarh al-Ta'dil or Ilm al-Rijal, what we have is more superior to you on two fronts: the frequency of miracles, and number two, and frequency and quantity, and the amount of people who know their names, the exact names and biographies, when they lived, where they died, and what geographic region they died, and the fact that it's actually, we have a better chain of narration. And by the way, most of the chains of narration are rejected, which means there's a critical method, what you call naqd, which is applied to that. What we have is better than what you have. And you, not, with all due respect, if you deny that, you're not doing so out of intellectual argumentation. You're actually doing so because of the forefather point. You have a tribe, you have a and you must be with them. Because if this is your argument for why Moses is true, then wallahi, uqsumu billah al-azim, wallahi, may Allah curse me and destroy me in this place, if the argument I have provided to you right now is not better. Wallahi it is.
Right. So you've made 8 points there that I could remember, that I was counting along. So number one, you spoke about our chain of narration, and you said it's really not very good at all, and there's 1,300 years, you're saying 1,400 years without any stuff, and you quoted this Neuwirth figure, or whoever he is, I forget his name, Jacob, what's his name? Neusner, who I did some research on, and he's a secularist. So it's not as if that,
genetic fallacy.
So it's not as if. Sorry.
That's the genetic fallacy. It doesn't matter if he was a Jew or a Muslim or Christian. If he's making points, he's making points.
No. Because he rejects certain things out of hand as a premise, right?
No problem.
He's a Bible critic like the rest of them, who has certain premises that he will not state. Right?
Okay.
The premise of Bible critics has always been miracles are not true, God is not real, and the Bible is therefore not divine. And therefore, based on that, let's now see what we come out of all of this stuff, right?
Proceed to the point.
The premise of all of the Bible critics.
Okay, that's irrelevant.
So that's first of all. Secondly, when you speak about your chain of narration,
yes,
right? The last time we spoke about the chain of narration, right, in part 1. You talked about how they've got all this biographical information about each person on the chain. So I did a bit of research, and I found the Isnad's website. Where it's collected the what's it called, Rajal or something?
Rijal.
Yeah. Sorry.
Rijal,
that's the one. Of all the
just means men.
Yeah, of all the different people in this thing, and they have the different titles. Right, they've got the one that means valiant begins with a T. For the people who are very good, what's it called? Tahi or Tahik? What's it called?
I don't know what you're saying.
It's got like a word, an adjective next to people to say whether or not they're very, very good, right? It means valiant. Tahik?
Dive?
That's the one.
Dive is weak.
No? So not
Dive means weak, yeah.
It begins with a T, it was very good.
Thiqa.
That was a thiqa, yeah. Alright. I knew you knew what I was talking about.
No, I didn't.
And if you click on one of them, it's a very useful tool on the internet, very useful amount of information, and you can see it's got all the biographical information, right? The majority of these take up about a quarter of a page, right, in Arabic. I take them onto Google Translate, find out what they mean, and I look to see what kind of information we have on these various people with the thicker label. Right? So there's some people who I was a bit impressed by, right? They've got dates, they've got places, occupation, like what you said. But that's maybe 10, 15 of them I could find that way. Looking through the vast majority of the people who had this label, I discovered something where in fact most of them do not have dates, many of them do not have places, most of them doesn't tell you anything about their life, anything about their occupation. In fact, you know very little about most of these people. And it seems to me that the people earlier in the chain and the people much later in the chain are the people you have the most information about. And everyone in between seems to be in this big gap.
So I think
you made lots of points.
Okay.
I'm going through now. And
all right, take your time, because you're only digging the hole deeper for me to criticize you.
One by one.
Take your time.
Because otherwise I'll forget the different points you made. Because you do go on a lot. I think you do this with Bob as well. Number 3 you talked about. Let's see if I can remember. Number 3 you spoke about. You know what? I'll go to miracles. You spoke about miracles with Muhammad. Well, again, you already admitted that you don't believe that miracles are a criteria anyway. Right? You don't believe that.
No, I didn't say that.
You spoke about how Muhammad's miracles are so amazing, and people.
I just said Ibn Taymiyyah said that.
That people could see the effects of the miracles.
I said that Ibn Taymiyyah said that.
Fingers and
You said that I said that they were not a criterion. I said that Ibn Taymiyyah said that they're not the only criterion, because a magician can do things which are. But I'm not saying that. That's not what I said. So that's just something.
So a magician could make the water come out of his fingers, and in fact, from our own sources, from the Sifri. In the Sifri, it actually says that somebody who claims to have split the moon is an idolater, right? That's something that says in the Sifri.
Yeah,
right?
It says that after Prophet Muhammad, by the way.
No, the Sifri was long before Muhammad.
Yeah. That's what you think.
The Sifri was long before Muhammad. Right? There were 2 collections of Sifri. One was from the school of Shimon ben Yochai, and the other was from the school of Yishmael.
Yeah, I know.
Both of whom lived many years before Muhammad, and both of them schools
when was it written?
Muhammad. Sifri was written maybe the 3rd century CE, the 4th century CE.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
Okay, we'll come to that.
Absolutely
No, it wasn't.
Right, and in fact, they are cross-referenced by other.
Oh, get me a source for that, because that's false. Keep going.
When
Even the Torah wasn't written 3rd century CE, bro.
I have the sources, not off the top of my head. I'm not, as I say, I'm not walking in front of
Okay,
the
fine.
media,
Go ahead.
But I can text you the sources, but I have a number.
Go ahead.
The issue of prophecies. The Romans would be defeated by this one. We also have that stuff in the book of Daniel, right? We have such prophecies
No
about
problem.
that.
Some of the book of Daniel might be true.
So that also doesn't.
So what? What does that want?
Especially since in Deuteronomy 13, it says that even if it comes true, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a true prophet. So that's also not working. A very important point that you seem to have missed, and I was really hoping you would elaborate on a point you said at the beginning, which was about Christianity. You wanted to say that you could make a much more convincing argument for Christianity than you could for Judaism.
Okay. Put that to the side.
No, I'm not putting it to the side because it's very important.
Yes, you can.
It's exactly showing what my point was to begin with, and you don't seem to have understood it, which is the issue of mass revelation is central to this claim.
Okay.
Right? A revelation in which an entire people heard words at the same time from God himself.
All right, Josh.
Something that no other religion has. And if you go to Christianity and you say, well, they saw miracles, they saw from a man. Just like with Muhammad, they saw from a man. No, none of these things were anything more than just a man. All you saw was a man.
Right.
We did not see a man. In fact, we did not see anything.
Did you see anything?
This is in Deuteronomy. The people.
Did you see it?
I'm 22 years old. I wasn't there 3,334 years ago.
All right, so you didn't see it.
No, I personally did not see anything. Right? As it says in Deuteronomy.
So when you say we, you're talking about some guys 3,000 years ago.
My ancestors. Right? You did not see an image. You heard voices. Right? There was a fire, and you heard the voice of God from heaven. That's what they heard, and they passed that down to their children, who passed down to their children.
Okay.
There was no way for that to be faked. If you
there is many ways to be
you
faked.
can show a way that that could be faked, then we can have that argument.
Okay, no problem. Let's start with the first thing that you mentioned, which is you mentioned some false things about this Isnad, yeah?
Right.
You said that you went on a website, and then you saw some names, and then you put it on Google Translate. This is exactly what you said.
Yes.
And then you researched the names, and some of them you could find dates, and others you couldn't. This is the argument from ignorance. Just because you couldn't find anything, it doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, so wait, hold on.
Can you give me after the discussion, can you text the names of the books so I can find out?
Yes, Siyar A'lam al-Nubala. Go to Siyar A'lam al-Nubala. Al-Dhahabi wrote a book with all the details of each and every what do you call it, Rawi, which is a narrator, from the time of the Prophet to this time. So that's number one. You can't access that, that's fine. So there's some things I cannot access in the Hebrew language, that's fine. But what I will do, if I can't access something in the Hebrew, I go to a rabbi. Yeah, I go to people like, maybe not like you yet, but maybe your seniors, and they will show me, this is what it says, that's what I say. And I have to respect that because they know more than I do. But you haven't applied that same intellectual humility with the Islamic tradition. You wouldn't do that with Judaism if just because you couldn't find something, you now have a judgment on the whole religion. No, that's number one. Number two is, in fact, let me ask you a question. Do you know what is required for a hadith to be seen as authentic in the religion of Islam?
It's to be sahih.
Okay, how? What makes a sahih hadith in Islam?
A chain which is more corroborated.
Pardon?
Was it a corroborated chain?
No. All right. So there are 5 criterion. I can go through them if you like later on. I'll go through them quickly now. There has to be muttasil. There has to be a joint. There's a chain of narration which goes back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The person has to be dabit, has to have either very good memory and or very good writing ability. If either of those or both of those things are not present in a person, even if the person is thiqah, and that's another thing, he has to be adl. Yeah, even if the person is adl, right, udul, which means that they are good, they're trustworthy and so on, that narration is not accepted because it's seen as someone who's incompetent academically, right? Number 4, there has to be free from illah and shudud. And 5, that's number 5 as well. So these are the 5 criterion. Now I'm asking a question. if these are the five, illa means defects, hidden defects, either in the sanad, which is the chain of narration, or in the matan, which is the actual written word, or shuduz, which means it cannot do mukhalafa, it cannot go against that which another person who is more trustworthy than them has said. These are the five criterion that must be in place for a hadith to be accepted. If you think about it logically, there's only one way in which someone can make a decision whether or not a chain is narration is correct, and that's through comparison, especially in category 4 and 5, shudud and illa. Shudud definitely, because you can't say that it's more or less veracious than what other X person has said, unless you know both persons' biographies. That's why in the very early times they did things called ilm al-rijal or ulum al-rijal, which is the idea of it's called ilm al-rijal, but it includes women as well, which is the idea that things are written down. Okay, things are written. Everyone we know where they lived. In fact, what you're saying is every single one of them, any chain of narration which is graded sahih in the religion of Islam, any chain of narration which is graded sahih in the religion of Islam, okay, that we know who these people are. Even if like for example, I'll give you an easy example. If person A lives in Azerbaijan, and person B lives in Persia, and they're in the 2nd century AH, and both of them contradict, or the person said that he took the hadith from his sheikh or from his teacher, and that teacher was living somewhere else, that hadith is rejected. For example, I'm giving an example. But how would we reject the hadith unless we know where both of them are living? Yeah, how can we accept it unless and in fact, he mentioned somebody in his chain, which is, for example, we don't know who he is. The hadith is termed mu'allaq. Mu'allaq is a da'if hadith, which is mu'allaq means there's 3 or 4 hadiths which are weak. One of them is mu'allaq, the other is mu'adal, and the third one is mursal. All of these different, if we need to know who these people are in order to classify the hadith as mursal, which means that at a tabaqa of the sahaba, from the companions to the prophet, someone's missing. Or mu'adal, there's 2 people missing in the middle. Or mu'allaq, which is that the person mentions someone and the sheikh is not there. So what you're saying is false. You have not studied this knowledge. You are making claims. You don't know what you're talking about. With all due respect, you need. This is an education. I'm not trying to humiliate you or belittle you. But what I'm saying is, going back to the point, if the point you're making is that preservation of the religion of Judaism and mass transmission of these people is more veracious, or is the way that you prove your religion, then what we're presenting to you in Islam is much more complicated, much more intricate, much more sophisticated than your system has been, is, or can ever be. It's finished, my friend. It really is. If that is your argument, I said to you here today that look, whatever argument you make for Moses, I will make a better argument for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You made your argument based on preservation. You said no, but the chain has people, we don't know where their dates are, we don't know where they lived, we don't know who they are. I've shown to you that this is absolutely false. I've given you references. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani wrote a book. It's called Al-Itqan. It's kind of like Sir Alam al-Nubala of the Dhahabi. Same thing, you know everybody what their name is, what they're good at, what they're not good at. Famously, Asim, who is a narrator of the Quran, he's very good at the Quran, but his hadith is not that good. So we accept him when it comes to the Quran. We don't accept him when it comes to the hadith as much, or that he'll need someone to corroborate him. There's too many particulars here, there's too many intricacies here for someone to claim that this is something which is haphazard, or something which is superimposed or contrived, and there is no historical, intellectual way in which you can compare your system, where for 1,400 years, that's, by the way, 1,400 years, ironically and interestingly, is the same time from now to Muhammad, by the way, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From now to Muhammad is 1,400 years. Imagine, from the first scroll that was written, the Torah itself, forget about the hadith, forget about the Talmud, the first scroll, Torah, that we have is 1,400 years between Moses and that first scroll. So imagine now, I'll put it in this way, imagine now I start writing hadith. No one wrote hadith, no one wrote Quranic codexes until now. And I write the hadith now. Would you say that this religion of Islam is very preserved and strong? You say no. You say, why did it take you 14 centuries to write the stuff down? Who did you hear it from? I say, I heard it from my friends who were my forefathers and my granddad. Say, your granddad lived in Egypt, he lived in this place. Say, how did you hear it? Say, his granddad. Say, what about his granddad? And then I'll go and do an ancestry test. And I advise you to do the same thing, because I don't think, if you do an ancestry test, maybe 70% is going to come from Estonia. I did an ancestry test, honestly, I did an ancestry test, and I found that I had a bit of Jewish in me, 5%. 20% was West African, and the rest of it was Arab, from the Arabian Peninsula. Yes, I was Arabi, like from the actual Arab. Yeah, so I have a claim. Muhammad Hijab says, look, my great-granddad, and I can go to, what do you call, Egypt, and I have like this thing called Niqabat al-Sada wal-Ashraf. They actually have that. It's a place where you go and you show that you have, my family members have that. I can say I'm Ahlul Bayt. Therefore, my granddad was the Prophet Muhammad. I can say this. So I can say this, I can claim, and therefore what my granddad said about the Prophet is true. I can write the Quran down from beginning now. They're nonsense, sorry to say, what historian would accept, but they accept it for themselves. But then that's their strongest argument for Judaism. But what I'm telling you, that the companion, the wife of the Prophet, and the companion Abu Bakr, he wrote it himself. Amr ibn al-As had his own Sahifa. And then Zuhri, 100 years after all these people, they had a state effort to write this Tadween al-Sunnah. You're saying what you have is stronger than what I have? Nonsense, akhi. No historian would accept that in a blue moon. If what you're saying is that you believe in your religion on those flimsy grounds, then you should believe in my religion 10 times more than you believe in your own. Why? Because there's exactly 10 times more closeness, or more than 10 times, closeness to the source that we have in terms of preservation than you have to yours. It's done, brother. You have nothing. So I'm asking honestly, if this is your strongest argument, you must accept Islam, akhi. You must, because you can see it. I know you, in deep down, bro, I think that you're sincere. And I think today, wallahi, you should say the shahada, bro. Enough is enough. Wallahi, enough is enough. You, every single interrogation, week after week, I've solved everything for you. You said there's no abrogation, we solved the abrogation. I showed you Deuteronomy. You see that Islam is about tawheed. Just like Moses, he came with one God, what they worship. And now I'm telling you that the strongest argument you have, we have 10 times the argument that you have. Here! So where now? Where you go now? Yeah, that's it. Please. Please.
Okay. First of all, yeah. you seem to have missed the fundamental part of what I was saying. The fundamental part of what I was saying was not the fact that, it goes back to a source when you go back through the forefathers. Just like yours can go through the forefathers, and like the Catholic Church can go through the churches. That wasn't the point I was making. That's not the fundamental. The fundamental is, what is the source? Is the source one man claiming to hear God speak to him, or is it an entire nation of people claiming to have heard God speak to them? It's a totally different ball game.
But you've missed my argument.
Hold on.
Continue.
And not only that, you talk about arguing from ignorance about systems of transmission. You have no idea about the transmission from Basin to Basin through the generations, from Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav HaShalom, I can do it too, all the way down to our present day, right? The transmission from Basin to Basin, from Av Basin to his Talmidim, from that Talmud to the next one, so every single generation through to today is something unparalleled. Because the way that somebody would be allowed on a Sanhedrin, in the first place was they would have had to have a total mastery of not only of the Torah but of the oral traditions as well. They would have had to be able to know it all Ba'al Peh, which means totally off by heart, right? The amount of testing that went into being allowed to be given smicha, which was the resting upon the head, so that you could be allowed onto the Sanhedrin by the previous generation, by your teachers, was something which was extremely
Josh, let me ask you a question. On this point, let me just ask you a question. When do you think Moses existed?
Moses existed, as in born and died?
Yeah.
So hold on, let me work it out, because if the Torah was given 3,334 years ago, and at the time he was 80 years old, so 80 years before that, 3,334 minus 80 is
3,400, whatever.
Something like that.
Yeah, 3,400.
And he lived for another 40 years after that.
No problem.
Because he died at 120 years old.
No problem.
On his birthday.
Okay, fine. So, what's the first source? So, what we're talking BCE here. BCE, for those who don't know, we're now in, let's say AD, yeah? we're in 2021 AD. So we're here on the timeline, okay? Sorry, 2020. Okay. You got me there, I have to say. Yeah? 2022 AD, yeah? We're here.
Yes.
You agree? All right, so that's the timeline. Where is Moses on this timeline? So here's 0, okay? Where is he? 1,400 years, right?
Let's work it out.
About 1,300 years, right?
2022 minus 3,334. What does that get us?
1,200? What is it? 1,200.
Anyone
Whatever.
got a calculator? Anyone's got a calculator?
Someone do it, please.
Someone do it. 2022
2022 minus what?
minus 3334.
Minus
3334. 3334.
1,300. As I said, like about 1,300. All right, so here we're 2022. This is 3,000. Sorry, this is 0. So between 0, yeah, and Moses is 1,300. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, except.
Sure.
What's your earliest source to Moses? That side.
The earliest written source.
Yes.
So the earliest written source that exists from the Torah, the earliest fragment, is a Birchas Kohanim stone that they found recently in archaeological digs in Israel.
No, not stone. I'm talking about the Torah. What is your earliest source?
The earliest source for any part of the Torah? Or
No, the whole thing.
Or the entire scroll
Yeah, the whole
of
thing.
the Torah?
The whole
So
thing.
it depends in which form you have it.
Yeah,
right?
any written form.
So in a written form of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we don't hold to be authentic,
Okay.
but does exist as a proof that the tradition was still
Okay.
going at that time.
Yes.
So that takes us to
Yes.
to about
Yeah.
200 years before the Common Era, something like that.
All right. So okay, great. So between that and Moses is 1,100 years, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
You're talking to me about historicity? Oh, this is ridiculous, bro, man. You started this conversation saying your hadiths were narrated 200 to 300 years after Prophet Muhammad, which is false. We showed you it's false. You're talking to me 1,100 years between Moses and the first written source you have,
Yes.
which is equivalent to from the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to the Victorian era. Like I said, imagine the time of the Victorian era, the first person that's going to write the Quran is in the Victorian era. I'm putting it in your mind. The first person, the equivalent of what you're saying, is that the first person who writes the Quran is in the Victorian era.
No, but that's not true, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that's the earliest
That's exactly what
manuscripts
you're
that we
saying.
have access to
Yeah,
today.
no problem.
There's a difference.
No problem.
There's a difference between
Fine,
saying
fine,
the first
fine.
Quran that's ever been
Fine.
written since Muhammad's time.
Okay,
is
let me
the Victorian
rephrase.
era,
No, good. You have a point.
To say
Let
that's
me
the
clarify
earliest-
it.
that's the earliest manuscript.
Josh, you have a point.
Difference.
If I said if we have the first, imagine if us coming and speaking Quran as Muslims, and the first Quran that we have printed in print was from the time of Victorian era. What would these people say about us? So your religion is 1,100 years. The first person wrote it about a fictitious man that didn't exist 1,400 years, 100 years before. Bro, what you're saying is nonsense, bro. You're not being fair to yourself. You are disrespecting your intellect. You are disrespecting your intellect, bro.
There is a substantive
You are
difference.
disrespecting your intellect.
You can say that over and over again.
No,
There's
you
a
are.
substantive difference,
Josh.
again, between these 2 points, right? If you came now, 2022, saying, I've got the earliest manuscript evidence for a Quran was Victorian times, 1,100 years
Yes.
after her. If you came now,
Yes.
right, that's very different to you coming in 2,000 years and saying the earliest thing we have was from Victorian times. There's a big difference, because if you couldn't...
I didn't get that.
Okay, if you don't understand the difference, between the earliest manuscript evidence,
Bro, when is
that
the-
you have access to right now,
When is the
being
earliest
200 years
manuscript?
ago,
When is the
and
man-
the earliest
when is
access
the-
you have is 2,000
Josh,
years ago?
when is the
It's a very
earliest?
different
When is the earliest
game.
When is the earliest manuscript evidence of the Quran?
Earliest manuscript, there is around now, right? The time of Muhammad, right? The thing in Cambridge.
30 AH in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Okay, 30.
Birmingham.
So between the Prophet Muhammad's death and the codified, it's like 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, no problem. No problem. This is reasonable, guys. This is very reasonable. When I say the first manuscript evidence is 1,100, brother, this is not reasonable. I believe in Moses.
Yes. But only because Muhammad.
No.
Yes.
Don't tell me what I believe, brother.
Really?
I don't tell you what you believe.
So you believed in him
Look,
without Muhammad?
Yes, there's evidence of Moses. I can give you that evidence without Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The evidence, for example, Merampata, Ramses II, after him, he had someone called Merampata. He had a stele. It's called the stele of Merampata. And in the 19th line of that stele, it's a rock written in hieroglyphics. And it mentioned Bani Israel and the children of Israel. Even there's extra biblical evidence of David himself. Have you heard of the Tel Dan stele?
I've heard of it.
Okay, it's a stone, it's a rock, which it goes archaeological evidence, which says that Veta, how do you say David again? David, yeah. Veta, it's Beit, isn't it? It's his house. How do you say house?
Bias.
How do you say house?
Bias.
Is it bias?
Or Bayet.
Bayet. We say, yeah. Maybe it's a different dialect. Yeah. I'm about to say, maybe the guy taught you wrong. Anyway, we've got the Tel Dan stele. The Tel Dan stele is extra biblical evidence of the existence of David. Just like the Merampata stele is extra biblical evidence to the existence of the children of Israel in the time of Egypt. So I don't need the Bible even to believe in these prophets. In fact, to be honest, if this wasn't even there, I'd still believe it because of the Quran. However, these things bolster my belief. Look, we have to be fair and historical about this matter. I don't know if you know in the academic world, there's a guy called Israel Finkelstein, not the one that talks about Palestine, not him. There's another guy called Israel Finkelstein. In the beginning, they were called the minimalists in history. They had this idea that actually the Bible is over-exaggerating, blah, 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 and these things, and they didn't believe in the existence of the house of David. And then they changed their opinion when they saw this evidence. So there is extra biblical evidence. I'm not saying that. I am saying that right now as it stands, if you said this yourself, you said that they heard God speak. Yeah, okay, fine. Hearing God speak is something supernatural, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, all I've mentioned to you, the 10 points I mentioned, is something supernatural as well. Yes? Is it not supernatural? Yes, we say it's supernatural. It's supernatural. So your chain of narration, which brings us back to something supernatural, which is 1,100 years late in terms of codification, is not better than what we have. Moreover, I will say something more important than that. And this is not even the argument. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, one of the scholars of Islam, he says something very interesting. What he says? He says that what's different between the Quran and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of the other prophets that came before them is that all of the other prophets that came before them, they had something to see and or hear that would make them believe the religion is true. That's what he said. Something for the eyes to see or something for the ears to hear. That's what he said. But he said that the Quran could not be like that. Do you know why? Because Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ. We have not sent you except for all of humankind. So therefore, if the miracle was confined to the people, they would have an advantage in being able to verify it than we do. Because if I hear something directly or see something directly versus if someone told me it, seeing something directly, this is more clear. If, for example, I started to walk on water, I go to over there, I start walking on water, all 120 kilogram of me, somehow I'm walking on the water. And you, all 25 kilograms of yourself, walking on water. But you probably can. Anyway, the point is, maybe it's not a miracle for you, but it will be a serious miracle for me. And then if some people, like the group here that's in front of us, this man, the maniac, and these others here, they witnessed it. Yeah, they witnessed it.
Yeah.
Say, yes, this Muhammad Hijab, he went into the water and he walked on the water. Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Supernatural thing. Brilliant. Okay, if they saw that he walked on the water, yeah? These guys have an advantage over the other people that came after them. If we go as a group to our kids and our grandkids and all these other people,
you are following me.
And all of these individuals.
In front.
Yes.
Of the Muslim
Let's wait for this guy.
Why are you following me? Why are you not following Muslim people? I'm not a Muslim. Why are you following me?
I think the man has
You see the behavior of Muslim people, the way they behave. Why are you following me? This man is a Muslim man.
Okay, yes.
Why don't you go and stand in his presence? Why don't you do that? Why are you coming to me?
It's happened last week as well.
Muslims, why are you coming to me? Why? This is a Muslim man. Why don't you go and stand in his presence and disturb him and follow him and obstruct him? Why don't you do that?
He's playing the adjective game.
Why are you coming to me? Eh? Why are you coming to me?
الميكروفون
طب خذه.
جزاك الله
طيب
خير.
خذ جاي. All right.
If I say, the Quran says, Muhammad, that Allah teaches pedophilia,
So
I
Okay.
say that.
the point is,
This man
that's why
agreed.
we believe, right? That's
This
why
man
we
teaches
believe
the same thing.
that actually,
That Allah
yeah,
teaches
the
pedophilia. Why
Quran
don't you go to him?
is something which should be analyzable, or the book should be something analyzable by the target
The
audience.
same thing.
Which is
that
why, for example,
Allah teaches
the
extreme
miracles or the
pedophilia.
evidence, we call it the
Why
evidences.
don't you go to
The
him?
evidences of the Quran, because it's called ayat. Ayat is actually roughly translated to evidence, yeah? The evidences of the Quran,
Same word as the verses.
yeah,
Oh.
because each verse is an evidence in itself, right? So the evidences of the Quran, yes, are things which we today can analyze. So I've given you the ideas of the prophecies, you've heard some of them. But Islam goes deep into prophecies, where Islam's going to spread, it's going to spread to this country, that country, or this is going to happen in the future, that's going to lots of prophecies, yeah? There's a book called The Forbidden Prophecies, which you can read in your own time, yeah? Number one. Number two is the language itself. The language is something which de-scopes what all the Arabs have been able to do at that time. Such that even they, the antagonizers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are not Muslim, they admitted that this is something which is inimitable from that perspective, okay? Number three, the structure of the Quran is such a way which cannot be mimicked, we would say. So we have our set of arguments, I'm not going to spell them out to you right now, but we have our set of arguments which requires or which can facilitate someone of today's era looking into these things now. They don't need to be there when someone is walking in the street or on the water. The point therefore is, if something which is meant to be for everyone, all human beings for all times, the facilitation of evidence should be for all places and all times as well. That's why we believe the greatest miracle is actually the Quran. You see the point?
I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
But you still have kind of missed the point. There is a substantive
And by the way, sorry, you can, if you want more details on the miracles and the evidences, go to my website, kbyh.co.uk. Yeah, kbyh.co.uk. Yeah. Well, it's nothing funny
You're a
about
top class actor.
Thank you. kbyh.co.uk, and you'll find it's a free PDF. You can just download it. Proofs for the evidence of
I very
Islam.
much enjoyed your recital and your debate with David Woods. You're a showman. It's.
I think
quite
you're
clear.
starting to get it yourself, man. You've got your own little style, don't you? You've got your own little preacher style. Where do you get that from? The evangelical Christians? You wag your finger and you raise your voice. Yeah, don't try it, man. You've got your own style. But bro, look into it, my friend. Because next week, hopefully, yes,
Yeah.
we'll be praying with us. As I'm going to go pray now, Asam. I'm going to pray Asam. Prayer. Yes? Think about it. If one day, yeah? Think about it, bro. Make at least do one thing. We'll do one thing. Supplicate to God. Say, if Islam is the truth, guide me to it. Would you do that?
Pray to God. Ask Him.
Guide me to a better way.
I mean, we do that in every prayer. Right?
Okay, no. But make it
specific. Daily prayers.
Make it again.
Ask God to endow us.
Okay, how about
with
this? Supplicate to God and say, if Islam, the religion of Islam, is true and the Prophet Muhammad is a true prophet, then guide me to that way. Fine? Okay.
It's a bit of a weird thing to do.
It's weird. It's not weird. It's fine.
It's a very weird thing to do.
It's fine.
Right?
On that note, I'm going to go pray Asr.
Man's testimony rather than entire nation's testimony. It's a bit weird to me.
Don't worry, it's not one man's testimony. We have our tradition. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. This guy needs to be there with me. When I debate with my wife, when I argue with her. Every time I